Welcome to the Showcast, a series of candid conversations from film festivals and film markets everywhere, brought to you by The Film Verdict and hosted by yours truly, Matt Micucci. Today we delve into the programme of this year's edition of one of the most important non-fiction film festivals in the world, Vision du Réel, which will be taking place in Nyon, Switzerland from the 12th to the 21st of April. And we'll be talking about it with its artistic director, Emilie Bujés, who, beyond revealing some of the highlights from this year's film offerings, will also be talking with us about its industry section and some of the history of Vision du Réel, as well as its mission statement. So fire up an Audiotini and listen to the audio waves as they fly through the air. This is the Showcast. Hello, Emilie. Welcome to the Showcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to talk with you. You know, we'll be discussing Vision du Réel and this year's edition of the festival in a moment. But first, since this is the first time we talk, I would like to break the proverbial ice by asking a very simple question that I kind of like to start these podcasts with. And that is, what is your earliest memory of cinema that you can remember? You know, one of those memories that you feel maybe kickstarted this interest and passion for cinema that you then pursued in your professional life?
Well, I think it would be difficult to choose one memory. I don't have that moment where I'm like thinking, oh my God, this is it. I think that there are like different moments and phases in my life, starting maybe with like watching Thriller that I remember as a kind of like crazy experience. I was very scared back then. Then, you know, watching home TV with my parents, rather like shitty French stuff, because that's what they were watching. And then, you know, kind of like starting watching things up to the moment where I moved to Berlin and kind of like was every day at the Cinematheque, at the Arsenal there. And this is basically where actually it really started more seriously, I would say.
Would you say there were some filmmakers, or who were the first filmmakers who you really kind of became obsessed with, or maybe, you know, just awakened the cinephilia in you?
I guess definitely people like, for instance, Chantal Akerman. I remember a screening of From East on Filmstock at the Arsenal. Exactly. I remember where I was sitting and the sound that, you know, the film was doing in the projector, like this feeling of the texture of cinema. So I think that, you know, in that moment, definitely her, some German people. There was, for instance, Philipp Schäffner, but also like all the classical kind of like, of course, you know, Godard and those kind of people. So I think it went very eclectic very soon. I think I was just like more kind of like curious and you know, motivated, avid for, you know, anything and like rather digging great variety than kind of like focusing on one single person.
What is the journey that eventually led you to Vision du Réel?
Well, yes. So basically, I'm actually coming from contemporary arts. So I kind of like really had an education in history of art, then kind of like moved to contemporary art, was working in contemporary art as a curator, working a lot with, you know, moving image artist films. And in order to do that, in order to kind of like prepare shows, look for new people, I was also participating in attending festival, not participating, as attending. And I was very kind of like jealous of festivals because to me, the attention, I mean, I know I'm still debating about it with colleagues nowadays, but the attention that one finds in festival is quite different than the one you will find in contemporary art events, where people are rather kind of like going quite fast and used to kind of like spend not so much time in front of a piece. Whereas in festivals, you know, I would end up having a discussion with someone about that sequence, you know, after 52 minutes, wasn't it amazing? And so basically I kind of like was feeling very comfortable in that environment. And so I was going to festivals more and more. And at some point I met the previous director of Vision du Réel at a tequila and mariachi party, Mexican party in Berlin. And he offered me the next year to come and do Q&As at the festival. And I entered the selection committee the year after. For 2 years, I've been doing both in parallel. So I was still a contemporary art curator at the Contemporary Art Center of Geneva and participating in the selection committee of Vision du Réel. And then at some point I gave up and fully kind of like fell for the festival world.
This year's edition is going to take place in Nyon, Switzerland from the 12th to the 21st of April. Correct, right?
Yes.
And so for those who are maybe not familiar, maybe not as familiar with the festival itself, can you tell us a little bit about its history and, quote unquote, its mission statement?
I think that it changed, maybe I would say, over time, the kind of like main goal or main mission or main kind of like definition, maybe even of the festival. It started at the end of the 60s in a shape that was quite, activists, very political, very much like in this period of time, of course, where it kind of like was related to what was happening around the festival in the world. What is interesting to know is that it was originally headed by Moritz de Hadeln, who later went to, Locarno, Berlin, everywhere, who was a very important figure for cinema in general, internationally, for a very long time. Then another director, his wife took over after him, and then another director came much later. I think it was 25 years later. They stayed, De Hadeln, the first ones, they stayed for 25 years. Then another director came in, I think it was 94. His name was Jean Perret, and he was very interested also in kind of like more artistic practices, I would say, and kind of like took the festival a little bit in that direction, for sure, during those years. He also stayed quite long. And then when he left, Luciano Barisone took over with maybe similar, but also different, because I think that, it basically the festival is also always reacting to the artistic director and kind of like being under the influence, let's say, of each festival director. And he stayed until 2017, and then I took over from 2018 on. I think that now we are very much aiming to, first, very importantly, not very interested in kind of like topics, surely not in human rights and all these kind of things that are also tightly related to the idea one can have of documentary film. We are very much defending the idea of nonfiction as a cinematic form. And that's what we're looking for. We are looking for, kind of like the most adventurous, original, contemporary forms you can find in nonfiction, the authors that have like the strongest, more personal ideas of how to embody the stories they want to share. So it's really a matter of, looking for what we think is the most interesting cinema nowadays. And what is really important as well is to know that for us, nonfiction is something that is very vague in terms of the definition. So we're very open as well to, films that kind of like lean strongly to fiction.
What about Nyon itself? I mean, I've never personally been there. What's it like there? Why do you feel it's such an ideal setting for a festival like this? And also, if I'm someone going there for the first time, let's say, what kind of clothes should I pack?
Very good question. Well, so first, Nyon is, I think, both a blessing and what's the opposite? How do you say in English?
A curse.
A curse, exactly. It's a curse because it's a small city and everything is very complicated in that regard because we are missing everything in terms of space and infrastructure. So we are building tons of things which kind of like seem sometimes a little absurd. It's a blessing because it's exactly what makes it so special because we are still a very big festival. We have like 1,400 people attending internationally, a lot of audiences coming. And so it's basically, to say it in a slightly romantic way, the town is really beating with the festival. So it's really kind of like everything what's happening feels like the festival, like Nyon is becoming Vision du Réel for those 10 days. So you can come and it's going to be very easy to meet people. It's very kind of like easy, nice, very kind of like joyful and again, very practical in terms of, also meeting, encountering people. What you have to pack? Well, you have to pack your swimming suits because in Switzerland, we have now a very important tradition to swim the whole year long. I'm not doing it so much, I must say, but the team does it each week or more. So whatever the temperature of the lake, if you're brave, you can find people to swim with. And it's very nice, of course. And then for the rest, I mean, in the past years, we've had fantastic weather. So, there is like really this thing that you go to cinemas and then you hang out on the main square drinking beer outside, and it's just wonderful. So take, your glasses, your swimming suits, take some rain stuff just in case, and you're going to have a wonderful time.
Could be an interesting redefinition of networking opportunities, just getting together with people and jumping into freezing water.
Well, they do it in the north in several festivals, and I know that it's very efficient.
Yeah. You said something really interesting earlier. You put the emphasis on non-fiction films rather than documentaries. Before we get into maybe the specifics of this year's edition, I'd like to ask you then, do you feel like we're in a golden age of this hybrid that maybe you talk about when you say non-fiction cinema?
Well, I think that we have always been, I don't really believe in this idea of a definition of documentary, which would be like capturing something, because I think that, as soon as you have someone behind the camera, as soon as you are editing, as soon as you are filming something, what you are filming is not the same. So, I think that there is a certain degree of hybridity that has always been there. We are kind of like dealing with it in a more kind of like straightforward way rather than, I think it's just that we are okay more and more about this fact and dealing with it and enjoying it maybe a little more, in the sense that, as soon as you kind of accept the definition of, it's reality seen through the eyes of someone. I mean, if these eyes need science fiction to translate that reality, then, we are very kind of like free in our understanding and in our willingness to receive films, because for me, it's mainly a matter of audiences. It's really, we do have people saying, hey, but it looks like it was staged. And you're like, well, but the director was trying to express something, and at some point it didn't work the way he wanted. He'd fled and he didn't catch it, whatever. There is always a reason. And I think, if that's around and that's clear, then of course everything is open. So I think, yes, we are in a moment where we're definitely kind of like freer and freer each year.
I think that's pretty much it. Actually, an interesting follow-up would be, there may be some filmmakers listening to this podcast out there. And so I would like to ask you, what is your main criteria when it comes to selecting works to be showcased at Vision du Réel?
It's very hard to pin it down, and it's very subjective as well. I think that it's like essential that, we are very clear about that, because this year we received 3,300 films, and out of that we took, I think, 128. And it's not only a matter of, us loving a film, it's also a matter of us trying to build the whole program and making sure that each section, each competition is kind of like embracing as much variety as possible. So there are films that we love and that we cannot take for other reasons. I think that's like, if I had to describe it, I would probably say that, of course, it's about being surprised, and it's about a certain kind of honesty. It's about like ambitions also. I think, like if we feel like there was an urge to do something and the person has been really looking for the kind of like most original, but also, I don't know, inspiring manner to embody it, it's hard to kind of like, it's like art. So there is something that is also, truly personal, emotional for the person that are welcoming it. So,
well, it sounds like the vision then is at the heart of Vision du Réel, appropriately, I would say too. We've come to the centerpiece of this podcast. When it comes to this year's edition, I'm just going to put the question as simply as possible. What can we expect from the program? What can you tell us about the program of this year's edition?
First, we are very happy and proud. It's been hard. It's always, it really always feels like a travel for us, starting with a few films to reach that 128. And right now, I also feel like, I'm in the middle of it. So it's hard to kind of like see the whole picture. But I know that actually for me, those films kind of all belong together now. It's a very strong edition. I mean, if you want some highlights, what would be interesting for me would be to try and watch whole competitions or whole sections, because I think that they do indeed together, build another picture of 24 what's happening in nonfiction films. So I think that in the International Feature Film Competition this year, we have 15 films, and those 15 films are first all world premiere, except for one. So 14 world premiere and one international premiere, first of all. What is very interesting as well, and that's also something that is a specialty of ours a little bit, is that 10 out of 15 films are first feature films. So for us, there is a really important job, which is, kind of like digging in this 3,300 submission and looking for people that are not out there yet and that we want to help kind of like enter the international circuits. And also directors that in some cases we knew already from, previous shorts or whatever, but like 10 out of 15 are first features. So it's really kind of like, the idea of emerging people and allowing them to be in our international feature film competition. It's also like half male and female. So, I mean, we are very happy about also the shape of the competition. Then if you look into detail, it's a very strong year for Switzerland, I have to say. We have 3 films that are co-produced in Switzerland, out of which one is called, for instance, The Landscape and the Fray by Nicole Vogeler, who is a Swiss-German but based in Germany. And it's about kind of like the border between Bosnia and Croatia, and about people trying to cross that border. And it's like very fertile in the way she somehow interspaced their stories, their path, their transition there, and the story of this land, which of course, with the war, the previous historical things that happened that are still kind of like marked on the history and on the bodies of the people living there. So there is like that relation between the two of them. And it's also a matter, in that case, of, looking for cinematic forms to, embody space, those empty space, those difficult space, them kind of like being there, not being there. I mean, she's really looking for a cinematic form to kind of like embody the difficulty, the harshness of this moment of being stuck at the border. The 2 others from Switzerland are called The Song of Others by Vadim Jendreiko, and Far West by Pierre-François Sauter. Pierre-François Sauter, Far West is shot in Capo Verde, and is about kind of like fishing, a village which is confronted by international massive fishing action from Western people. So there is this confrontation, whereas Vadim Jendrenko is much more kind of like an intimate essay, personal, about Europe, also of course related to refugees, but not only, really kind of like a history at large of Europe as a territory, as a space, as like all the difficulties and perhaps beauty that it encloses. Then we have like some films that are lighter, such as Sophie Benoit, that also came in the past, who made a film called Apple Cider Vinegar, who is like starting with someone who has a kidney stone. And she starts with this idea of the kidney stone to kind of like think of stones in general in the world. It's like a wandering around the world and around those topics, starting with stone. Of course, there is also political dimension. So, how do you start with something very small to kind of like expand it? Fragments of Ice from Ukraine is only composed of archive footage, home movies from the father of the director. And basically he was a figure skater in the ballet on ice from the Soviet Union. And he's been like traveling his whole life to kind of like take part in shows everywhere. And there was this kind of like eagerness to be in the West and everything that you can do in the West. And of course, when the walls falls down, they realize that the West is not as great as they thought it would be. So there is something very interesting that, of course, also has an interesting echoes in the present. Very impressive. And again, only home movies. So, both very political and highly, personal and impressive in terms of material. Also from Ukraine, we have In Limbo in Limbo from Ukraine, which is the director that has to stay with her parents because in a village, because the Russian invasion was close to Kiev at that point, and she had to kind of like, stay with them to be sure to be okay. And it's like really kind of like, both this moment of the invasion, anxiety, and being with your parents at that age, which is, of course, as well, very difficult. It's very quiet and very graceful. We have from Syria, very kind of like moving and visually highly inspiring as well. My Memory is Full of Ghosts by Anas Sawari, which is shot in Homs. And it's about basically life after war. How do you continue with the remains of the past, of memories, present, which is like still very much haunted by the past, both, pragmatically because the city is still very much destroyed and because it's so close somehow. Visually, it's really very much looking again for a language that kind of embody, a feeling of the city and a feeling of the emptiness and the difficulty to continue. Okorimono is a film from Canada that is shot in Nagasaki. The director is following a protagonist that goes back to Nagasaki to empty a family house and who is kind of like finding memories, both of the family and of what happened in Nagasaki, of course. It's very quiet and kind of like very nostalgic, but also, of course, super intense in terms of everything that is being told. Then we have The Return of the Projectionist, which is shot in Azerbaijan in a village. And it's really, in that case, it's like more of a very much leaning towards fiction and very cinephile. It's about those two protagonists that really want to reopen the cinema of their village. And so the whole film is about them looking for a bulb and, trying to fix the projector and, like life in a village. Remote from everything, and it's quite magical. And again, like for people that love cinema, it's very touching. Rising Up at Night by Nelson Makengo from Congo is about people in Kinshasa in darkness, waiting for electricity, waiting for light. And again, and I think it's the case of all the films that are in the International Feature Film Competition. It's really about kind of like looking for a cinematic shape to embody the experience that they are going through. So very efficient, very powerful. Kamai is shot in Afghanistan, and it's about Hazara family, which is a oppressed minority, and their daughter committed suicide, and her sister is trying to kind of like understand the reasons. It's very poetic, very experiential as well. I have really strong memories of, shots of like snow and wind and again, like trying to give you a sense of the landscape. And of course, the film ends up with the Taliban taking over power, which of course for them is a very bad news. Mother Vera is from the UK, and it's shot in a Belarusian monastery, and it's about this woman who had to kind of like enter a monastery because her partner got into prison. So it's a very strange mix of atmosphere, because there is like on one side the monastery, on the other side all these kind of like dark elements of her past life. It's very, very cinematic, shot in black and white. There are like shots of her running in the snow with her horse. So it's like, again, kind of like also a film that, recalls a lot of cinematic reference. So very powerful and impressive visually. The three last ones, To Our Friends from Spain, from by Adrian Orr, who had come in the past to Vision du Réel. It's again like a quite leaning towards fiction, coming of age. No, not coming of age. Let's say young adults that somehow are in this moment of life where you make decisions that will have a huge impact on your life. It's very sensual. It's very kind of like much, also looking for bodies, trying to understand how, things are. It's about, a girl and a boy that spend a lot of time together, and somehow they are kind of like moving apart because life is just like that. And we are just following this moment. Where the Trees Bear Meat by Alexis Franco is like kind of a Western shot in Argentina about droughtiness and the lack of water to feed the animals and everything, like all the implication it has on them and on a family that is dealing with animals. it's produced by Roberto Minervinis, and you can see somehow a familiarity there. And last but not least, from Lebanon, Farah Kassem, We Are Inside 3 Hours, is, like a portrait of Farah Kassem, the director, who is trying to kind of like find a common language with her father, kind of like reconnect with her father, while in the background, we see everything that has been unfolding in Lebanon in the past years. So, how to kind of like, again, a double portrait of, your own family issues, difficulties, and those of a country.
And that's just one section.
That's just one section. You want it all?
That's enough for now, but it does really represent the diversity of this year's program and how cool it is that like so many different visions are coming together in the one program. So I urge the listeners to check out the website for more information about other films that will be screening. But I did want to maybe also mention that, within the program, first of all, there's going to be so many great guests attending, but this year's guest of honor will be the great Chinese filmmaker Jia Zhangke. I read in an official press release that this will be his first trip to Europe since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, which makes it 4 years, I guess. So, and I understand that there will be a retrospective of his films that will be running through this edition. Is this correct?
Yeah. I mean, this is in collaboration with the Swiss Cinematheque. So the Cinematheque is showing all the film archive, is doing an entire retrospective, whereas we are showing all the documentaries and some fiction because it was just like impossible not to screen them. So yes, in total, it's 12 films that we are going to be screening, and we are super excited to welcome him. Of course, it's been a dream of ours for many years, and indeed, he made also that very nice quote. And I think for him, it's going to be quite special as well to be, kind of like elsewhere again after such a long period of time.
I'm always in awe of the Swiss Cinematheque as well. So whenever it's mentioned, I always have to express my admiration for it. So sounds great. And of course, we must not forget to mention that, we spoke about some of the main features of this year's program of Vision du Réel, but I would like to ask you about its industry strand, more specifically, maybe a little bit of an overview. What are its characteristic traits? And if I'm a professional involved in filmmaking and film production, why would I want to attend it?
Well, I think that this is really a precious platform. Also taking advantage, going back to this thing of Nyon, also taking advantage very much in that case of the city, because you're going to be super efficient to meet the people you need to meet. And we are very much paying attention to, kind of like creating something that is coherent throughout the programming and the industry, so that potentially anybody you will meet will be someone that is, interesting for you. Of course, in a broader understanding. In terms of the industry, it's a lot of people attending, 1,400 more or less each year. And we have activities that cover each stage. So you can really kind of like, take part in the pitching. If you are in development, you can take part in the works in progress. If you are later, or the rough cut lab, if you're stuck with your cut. So it's really a matter of kind of like finding the right activity in order to look for partners, look for feedbacks, look for distribution, look for money, look for sales, look for, funds, for whatever. Everybody is going to be around and willing to help.
Brilliant. So Vision du Réel takes place from the 12th to the 21st of April in Nyon. But is it true that it also reaches outside of Nyon with a series of touring screenings?
Indeed, it reaches outside of Nyon in different manners. On one side, because we are screening films the whole year. In Nyon, we are screening films that we haven't screened at the festival because we feel like people might have seen them already. Outside, we are accompanying the release of films that we have screened. So that's really kind of a double mission that we have the whole year long. What also is interesting is that we have an online offering for people in Switzerland. So you can watch some films also after the festival for a few more days. Some films will be available online. And we also have, for industry people, we also have a film market which allows you to watch films both from the selection and beyond for buyers. And it's like more or less 400 films each year. So, and this is of course available for a while, also remotely. So, there are a lot of offerings that will allow you to, beyond the festival experience, and like have a feeling for it.
Well, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today on this podcast, Emilie, and I feel like all that's left for me to say is I wish you and the team all the best with this year's edition of Vision du Réel. Anybody who would like to know about this festival can check out the official website. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Showcast, where we spoke about Vision du Réel taking place in Nyon, Switzerland from the 12th to the 21st of April. And like I said, we covered a lot of ground, but if you'd like to know more details and nuances, make sure to check out visionduréel.ch. As for us cinephiles, I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. Make sure to keep an eye and ear out for more upcoming candid conversations from film festivals and film markets. The Showcast will return soon, so till the next time, this is Matt Micucci signing off. See you soon.